Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of Not Another Demo. As you know, or hopefully you know by now, in episode 7, Not Another Demo is really our attempt at breaking the kind of formulaic conversations that happen between vendor and consumer. And so we're really here having a real conversation. This week we are joined by Craig Pfister, Katia Pereira, and Mike Miller from Accellion, and we're going to be talking with them. I'm going to let them do their intros because they'll definitely do a better job than I will. So with that, Craig, I'm going to pass it over to you, let you guys do your intros, and then we'll jump right into it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me today. Looking forward to the conversation. Name's Craig Pfister. I'm the Vice President of Sales Engineering at Accellion, and I manage all of our pre-sale sales engineers across the globe here.
Nice. Katia?
Hey, Katia Pereira. Nice job on the R rolling there, Matt.
You do better than
Craig is, I've had a lot of practice. But Craig is actually my boss, and he works with me at Accellion. So I am a sales engineer working at Accellion, doing technical demonstrations and talking to clients about our product every single day, and talking to our clients about the security landscape and you know what they're seeing out there.
Excellent. Mike?
Man, I thought you did a better job rolling your R's in rehearsal, but still pretty good. Hey, everybody, Mike Miller. I'm the account manager. Katia and I are partners. I take care of our customers and look for folks that we can try to help out in Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. So yeah, thanks for this, Matt. Really appreciate the opportunity. Yeah,
absolutely. And of course, Lloyd and myself here from the Cloud Security Alliance. We are sans Aaron Bregg this week, so you'll get less of Aaron. So anyways, to get things inside joke, that's why Lloyd and I were laughing. To get things going, the question that I usually like to start these with, and Craig, I'll direct this one towards you. You know, we're really at a time where meetings, we have more than ever. Virtual meetings, we have more than ever. Vendors are hitting people up maybe more than ever because no one is traveling. We got lots of time in front of our computers, so everyone is super busy right now. So in a sea of vendors and meetings, why would someone or why should someone spend a half an hour or an hour with Accellion? And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, it's a great question, and what we're doing here is really kind of a fresh take on the evolution of technology around content transport, and really just looking at something that's been going on for 30 years. Obviously, we've been seeing an explosion in migration to the cloud and inevitably digital transformation through COVID. So, we offer a very compelling package in a platform. It's called the Content Firewall, but inevitably what it's doing for clients is enabling them to really manage and still perform their business operations and moving content while they're remote, right? Taking away some of those security concerns and really enabling the business to continue to move forward, especially in regulated areas, which we're seeing is just a tremendous pain point for them. So we're actually having really good conversations as this is all going on, luckily for us.
Okay, so give us some ideas then about, you mentioned, COVID and people working remotely. Can you give me some ideas of some scenarios where maybe we didn't think about some of this stuff when we were all on-prem in our offices, and now that we're thinking about some of this stuff, like some specific examples of those situations?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? As I'm talking to CISOs out there in the field, no one had a plan to go 100% remote. Everyone had some sort of plan to do 60%, 70%, whatever it may be, but those critical jobs, those operations jobs, those people that needed to be in the office, it was never planned for. And so when you think about that, it's like, okay, well, how do you actually operate? So everyone out there has had to make this adjustment globally and say, okay, hands are forced, we got to do this. And you hear the big dogs, you hear Microsoft, you hear Amazon talking, they're looking at 50% year-over-year growth in cloud. They're pulling things forward, but the problem is when we look at this from an enterprise perspective, the question remains, okay, now we're all remote, but how do I govern this, right? How do I ensure if I am regulated, say I'm in healthcare, and if you're domestic here in the United States, and you're saying, hey, I need to communicate with hospitals, with patients around HIPAA compliant data, that's not really always an easy problem, right? How do you get data out of the electronic medical records databases and move it out, communicate with those people, work with researchers, work with other doctors as everyone's disparate to get good healthcare. Inevitably as well, right? If you're reporting COVID cases and information from your hospital or from any type of perspective, that's the type of solutions we're helping, because we're living in a world where, hey, send us any size file you have, because we know these test results and vaccines and all these things are massive. So you need a way to get that data from point A to point B, but you need to do it within compliance of the bodies that are regulating you. And that's really the core problem that we're solving across regulated verticals.
So that reminds me of a thought that I've had lately. When we think of like COVID testing centers that are springing up in parking lots and other remote places, and now we're collecting all of this data. And Lloyd, maybe you can shed some light as to how some of this stuff is happening, or certainly the Accellion folks. I mean, we're collecting data in like new, different, weird locations through different means. How is all of that stuff being protected, right? I mean, we are talking about our healthcare information.
Sure. Yeah. For, in this scenario, we follow all the standard procedures. We're making sure that nurses are educated. It's a lot of education and training to ensure that while they're in these unique locations or finding themselves in environments that aren't traditional healthcare settings, that they are doing and knowing how to handle inputting that information. Then, of course, from the security perspective, we're extending our controls, we're extending our network out into places where it normally wouldn't be either, and ensuring that we're following all the same processes and procedures that we need to.
So, Craig, is that like an instance or a situation where you guys can fit into that process seamlessly? I guess from an Accellion standpoint, I'll take a step back. Sometimes I ask questions and then I roll it back 3 questions and then ask 4 questions. But a lot of times we look at security products can be terribly invasive into the operations of an organization, or hey, it's hard enough that we're having to teach people how to work remotely. Now we have this whole new process that we have to follow. So can you talk a little bit about how your platform fits into the workflow and how invasive that is or isn't?
And if I could add to that real quick, I think that, one of the challenges we see is that as we collect this information, we also have a need to now share it with more hospitals and other organizations than we would before. So really it's, how do you fit into that workflow? And then how do you ensure that that information that's being sent, is the right information, or they're authorized to send, those type of considerations as you move regulated data.
All great points. We'll try to unwrap some of that. And I got questions for you as well. You're expanding the perimeters. Inevitably, your perimeter is everywhere now, right? So we think about the framework that's probably the most appropriate for this is really zero trust, right? There is no way in an electronic world to guarantee who that other person is on the other side. Now, inevitably, when we talk about onboarding new hospitals or people you're working with at all times, it's twofold. One, it's identifying that user, right? Going through identity access management, utilizing where we sit and you look at security, everyone has made investments across the stack in security. What we see is that people to connect it all, right? So identity access management is arguably one of the hottest things out there. You look at how what it does, right, is it identifies that user, gives you that zero trust framework in some sense. But now that everybody's remote, you can have a robust argument about what is SSO, right? It's different when SSO is operating on premise and you're in the corporate network. But if everyone's remote, how are you guaranteeing that person is who they are? You're giving them access to things like the VPN. I mean, let's just take Twitter, for example, right? I know it's not healthcare, but they got access in, right? It's username and password, and then they're in on all the verified accounts. They can see all the messages. It's the same transitive problem. So manage that user, right? Try to identify them the best they can. So we integrate with their identity access management tools. Also, that gives you rights management. So we're then going to give them access databases that they have access to regardless of the endpoint. So we're thinking about COVID drive-in centers, right? No reason in 2020 you can't get that information on your phone or on a tablet and get it securely. So it's about managing that user through any endpoint, right? using those skills to get them into databases. So when we talk about VPNs for things that have traditionally been on-prem, we can get around that. We hear all the news about, VPN access and liabilities. We inevitably use it too, but I think we all know that technology's been out there and there are risks to it. So to prevent that, what we're doing is, we're monitoring every action on the platform with the user, and we connect them into those databases, regardless if they're on-prem or the cloud. So again, just another flip on a CASB, cloud access security broker, where they thought about the cloud, and it's like, well, reality is people still have data on-prem. Traditionally, VPN answered that. Well, if we switch it up a little bit and think about it, most organizations have invested in antivirus. They may have invested in advanced threat protection. So what we're doing is, we know that user, we use multi-factors to get them. We monitor that activity. We let them get the data out of on-prem or in the cloud. Now they can pull it out and share it, whether that's on a phone, whether that's using key platforms, folders to collaborate, all things that people know, email. But every single one of those transactions is governed, and we send it to their stack to get it scanned by antivirus and advanced threat protection. So if there is a break in that zero trust framework, we're going to catch it in transmission and quarantine the content that would inevitably infect the organization. Now, the last little pillar on this becomes DLP. So let's think about HIPAA, right? Endpoints and DLPs, it's very hard to manage. How do I know this employee, wherever they are at home, is not going around my endpoint? So let's manage this through the network and say, every transmission we have, we're going to pass it to their network DLP too, regardless of the endpoint and regardless of the protocol, so it can get those scans done and stay within compliance for the organization. So it's really a broad stretch of, let's take these ideas and start to form them into one platform, allowing organizations then to expand that perimeter and hopefully have more control, right? There is no security unless you can see it. If you can't see it, you can't defend it. And so really it comes down to then taking every single thing we track, using that security stack, and then putting it into their SOC, using that SIM. So if it's Splunk, if it's QRadar, if it's outsourced, whatever it may be, right, wherever they track that data, to then let them actually analyze it and use it, right? That's really the end game that we're looking at here. So when we think about this, Lloyd, I'm just curious, what are the problems you're seeing as the perimeter has been? What type of things are you looking at saying, this keeps me up at night?
Yeah, one of the big ones right now is sharing information externally to the organization, and I think internally as well. When we think about a popular platform to use, Microsoft 365, and if you're a mid-sized organization, especially with all the challenges we have today with the uncertainty and things like that, you're going to be very mindful of budget. So you're getting this platform that you get kind of controls, but not maybe necessarily enough in a regulated environment to, publish or allow your employees to on demand publish that externally, or share it with whoever, and, ensuring you're maintaining that compliance and that you're, not breaching any contracts, or, ensuring there's BAAs in place, the associate agreements. So how do you fit into that type of stack? Like when we talk about Microsoft, how do you help supplement some of the gaps you might have in your SKUs?
Yeah, absolutely. Inevitably, right? Microsoft is the powerhouse. We look at their market cap today. They're either one or two in the largest companies in the world. It's extremely impressive what they've been able to do. And we see our clients, right, looking to Microsoft to solve their problems, right, in this world. Everyone's got it. So the explosion of Teams is a no-brainer, right? It's there. SSO from Azure, those type of things we're seeing people take. And so the number one really request we're getting around Microsoft is, right, how do you make this the compliant space I need it to be to do my business? If I'm a government contractor, if I'm in healthcare, right? You have a couple options. You can definitely look at their E5 and they have the GCC High platform. But inevitably, the decision then comes to some organizations is, now I'm managing two platforms. I have my general Microsoft infrastructure, and then I have the GCC High environment. So we can actually serve as a wrapper around the entire environment, utilizing and protecting things like OneDrive, SharePoint, allowing them to share out of that with us consistently. We sit literally behind it there. So we would manage all of that and give them all the governance. We also would then integrate directly into Outlook and utilize them. So we have options, whether you're looking at utilizing a plugin and checking metadata tags and classifications to then enforce security policy. Obviously directly integrating with their DLP. it's really about controlling that infrastructure. And actually, you bring up the great point, is everyone's asking us about Teams. How can we not only protect the email, which obviously we know is still sadly the #1 way we communicate in business, but the sharing, the modernization of SharePoint and OneDrive that we all know and love from modern technology, but Teams is the beast, right? I hear from everyone, how do you control it? How do I know what file is shared? They're sending it to external, to internal. And so those are things, we're not there yet on Teams, but because the field is asking for it, we have to be there. This is the evolution of content transmission. Same with Slack.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we use it all the time, and even if we set the guidelines, the guardrails, there's still exceptions, and Teams gets used to communicate regulated information, which becomes problematic from multiple standpoints, and ensuring that the right people saw it. I mean, for starters. So, yeah, definitely. When you're implementing your solution, do you find that there's a lot of onus on the organization to develop their operational governance plans and ensure that they have solid data governance in place already, and not just rely on the tool to solve their problems?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? This is inevitably, there's two ways I go into any type of engagement with our clients and prospects, and it's either I'm solving a very direct problem. We had a client come to us in Germany, and they said, hey, we got to transfer COVID data. It's a massive amount of testing data and research from here to North America. So, we spun up a private instance that allowed them to automate the data from, a Microsoft bucket of data, pick it up, move it, scan it, and transport it here. That is core to how we look at this, but that's one piece. The other side is once someone's bought into, you're right, I'm struggling matching data sets and having governance over my communication. Now it gets to that point where we say, okay, let's talk about a holistic data governance architecture. What do you want to do? What is important to you? What's your classifications? What are things we need to be monitoring? Where do we need to go? Where are those vulnerabilities? And that's where it becomes a holistic play. Inevitably, then you start integrating with things like ServiceNow, right, for ticketing and management and operations. You start really integrating holistic workflows, business operations, and then it's really exciting, right? That clients that can take a look at this perspective, it not only helps them govern the business, but then it obviously enables them to do things like be compliant with CCPA and GDPR and have those things just done, which people inevitably are struggling with.
Sure.
So we've talked a little bit about some different platforms. Can you talk about the platforms that you guys currently are supporting, ones that maybe you're not supporting? I hate the word roadmap, but if there are some that are, like near or, because it's such a meaningless word, right? It's out there somewhere, but maybe talk about like where you're at now, some stuff you're working on in the very near term.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So I'm going to break out two types of integration. So the first thing we do, we want to be, I think, Lloyd, it's going back to what you were saying, it's managing those external users. So we hear anyone who's managed a OneDrive or SharePoint for a long time knows, I call it the snowball effect, right? You invite those external people in, you lose control, you don't know what they have access to, they've been in there for 10 years, oops. What we're doing is sitting in front of those. All of these applications I'm going to discuss have sharing tools. So we think about Google Drive, right? OneDrive. You think about, right, SharePoint, you have things like Box, you have things like Dropbox. All of these inevitably have ways to share content. Now, the shortcoming of that is now your CISO and your SOC and your NOC are going to be responsible for scrubbing that data and standardizing it. You also don't get all the governance you want. So the big play we have is we're going to sit, again, in front of those databases that are cloud that I just talked about, and then you're going to shut off the sharing from those, move it through us. Now, the on-premise stuff doesn't necessarily have sharing capabilities, right? So SIFs, anything that's a network share, right, that's local, they're not going to have sharing capability. So we're sitting in front of those, and everything I just described is out of the box we have today. Now, that is something you can get up in a matter of minutes to hours totally to have this type of infrastructure built. I have one client who sits in front of 6,000 SharePoint sites, and we map that back to the user. So that would be one type of integration. Now, the problem becomes when we think about things like healthcare, right? You have Epic and Cerner, which are massive electronic medical records databases. They're custom in a lot of situations. So Those we need to do some API work to get in front of, but inevitably that works. Same goes for Oracle. Everyone's got something from the Oracle stack. Same with SAP. So that's the work that inevitably will be done by clients if that's a need, right? To share content out of that in some manner to an outside party. The other side becomes that technology stack I was referencing. Out of the box, we integrate with MFAs and SSOs via SAML2 and Kerberos, Active Directories, your SIM tool via syslog, and it's the remainders, your advanced threat protection, your antivirus, data leak or data loss prevention. Those are all out of the box for us. But what people are pushing us for, like utilities, right, that work with nuclear power plants, they love products like OpsWat, right, CDRs. They want to have metadata scanning. So come through and take action on that. Lawyers want to have scrubbing. So they want to get everything out of the documents as they send them off to make sure they're clean. So that's inevitably where clients really start to push the limit. I mentioned ServiceNow, and add those. But we want to be in the places that are there. So Salesforce, we're already there. iManage, we're already there. But inevitably in the ones that are going to be a little custom, we leave that open for the clients to do those integrations. And that's really the first thing they do once they onboard.
One area I'm hearing a lot of people being concerned about right now is Slack. Do you guys have Slack integrations as well?
It falls into the same thing with Teams, right? It's the same idea. Obviously, Slack's a little more open source, inevitably as
which I think is why the fear is there. Yeah.
Yep. So that's exactly what our CTO is doing right now. You know, we took away from a management meeting. We came away and said, look, no one is out here solving this problem, right? Where it's securing all that content and managing it. There are attempts, but we should be entering this field. And so he's taken this project on, and this is 100% what he's focused on.
So we've talked a lot about healthcare, which we do a lot just because of Aaron and Lloyd's roles. But let's talk about some other industries that you guys are seeing this, you know, really becoming a pressing need in. I mean, I think every vertical and every company is going to deal with some level of you know, sensitive data, certainly. But can you talk about maybe a couple of other big ones where you're seeing a lot of needs and how you guys are helping in those?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about finance, right? The evolution, and obviously being in Michigan, and a Michigander myself, you know, you have one of the great American lending companies in Southeast Michigan. They're going public here for, I think, like $40 billion. But their entire plan is to use technology to do finance. But inevitably, what does that mean? Right? They are transferring massive amounts of data. So if you go through any type of lending process, right, think about all of the sensitive information just from a consumer standpoint to get a mortgage, W-2s, proof of address, photo IDs, pay stubs, all of the other things that you need to securely communicate back and forth with just to get your loan. So that could be automated, right? There's communication that gets tracked. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, requires that you store and manage all of your communications so you are not obviously doing predatory lending. So the restrictions around content access and management and finance is tremendous. And those are things where you're talking about, that's all external communication, right? All risk, all sensitive data that you as an organization are responsible for. And I believe it's for 7 years past the length of a loan. So if you're doing a conventional 30-year loan, that's 37 years. So managing that infrastructure is critical to the business. And that's just consumer. So if you then go to regional banks, as well as the larger banks, and wealth management, which is everywhere in the country, and investment management, you know, what they're doing is really, they're taking in data, they're taking in your money, they're doing electronic placements of stocks, they're sending trades all electronically, they're balancing that and reporting it back to you. But to do that job, that requires thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of connections of automated data points to bring data in, right? There's a massive misconception of what finance is. There's this idea of Gordon Gekko, greed is good, this guy just makes millions of dollars. You know, the reality, these companies are in business of getting data, and they hire really smart people. But the really smart people can't do anything because they can't make decisions without data. And so the entire backbone of finance is data transmission, data intake and output. And so when we think about automating all of these files that are just massive, right? Inbound and outbound, moving them to servers and businesses and operating a business, How do you do that remotely now is, I know it's taking some companies down, it's a huge pain. And so the way that we look at it, right, we can levy that pain and really allow the finance vertical to continue to operate probably more effectively just in this environment.
Yeah. So, so we talked a little bit earlier about the, putting the solution in place and how it becomes a part of the process. Let's say I am, I'm an accounts payable person. I'm not super familiar with security because that's not my job. And for anyone that snickers out there in the security world, you can't do their job, so don't expect them to do yours. So I'm sitting in front of my computer, and we've now implemented Accellion, and I'm responsible for transmitting this sort of data. How does this change my daily routine? How hard is this to get buy-in and to become part of the actual end user process?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think Lloyd kind of alluded to this too, right? Like, how are we protecting that ever expanding network? First, it's education, first and foremost. And so not only is it education, and it's a co-partnership between obviously us, the vendor, and the client to make sure that they have everything they need to train their staff adequately and get the message out. But the reality is on top of that, there's twofold. One, it's got to be really easy to use, right? Because if it's not easy to use, even if you train them, they're never going to do it, right? I'm a victim of my own pitch. I've done this for many years, right? We've all done something to get around the pain point that has been put in place. So we meet the users where they are. So we have plugins if you want to utilize them. We have ways for them. So if they want to be in Outlook, they want to be in Excel, PowerPoint, Word, OneDrive, Salesforce, we've got plugins in all these places. Okay. So inevitably, we can work with that organization just to make this intuitive and easy. When they click send, it just sends through Accellion. Then there's the other side of, it goes back to your question, Matt, right? I've got a pretty good infrastructure set up and a pretty good plan around my data security. Well, why not pivot off of all that work you've done, right? Pivot off the classifications. So now, if you're an account, well, you don't need to know, right? You click send in Outlook. Well, the system's going to know based on this tag, this domain takes certain actions. And we'll literally pick it up, we'll encrypt the content, we'll move it, we'll control that whole process. The end user doesn't need to know the difference, right? What is it, to your point? It's not their job.
Yeah. And I mean, I do feel like security companies and people in general, we sit up on a high horse a little bit, expecting everyone to have the same worldview that we do, and they just don't, right? Yeah. So I think sometimes, I hear this all the time. Oh, it's end user training, it's end user training, it's end user training. Look, an hour a week of me learning how to do accounts payable is not going to make me an accounts payable, person. And they could send me a little test and I'm going to fail it. We do that from a security standpoint with companies all the time, right? Hey, we're going to send you out this weekly end user training and then expect you to be security experts. Okay, but I'm a maintenance person, right? Like, this is not, you can't come down here and fix this machine that puts out millions of dollars worth of products every day. So don't expect. So I do feel like it's important that putting in security solutions do have some of that automation built into them, just so that we're not, we're still not putting the entire onus on the end user. It is important, obviously. I mean, I teach end user training, so I do feel like that's an important part of the process. But we really can't expect people whose jobs are not secure, right? And I'm sure people will argue with me on this one, but I feel like sometimes we use the end user as an excuse or a crutch to not do security correctly. So good to know that this is a scenario where you guys have some automation built in that you don't have.
The other thing, Matt, that's important to point out is, and Lloyd mentioned this, right? You're often, with our product and security products, you're not just securing yourself, but you're communicating externally. So I can't go train all of your external folks that you're sharing content with. I don't have any way to do that. So if you're a government who's sharing with your citizens, or you're an insurance company sharing with your clients, Katya can't go train all of the folks that, you might be filling out loans. And so that's another important piece, right? Is it has to be really easy, not just for the internal users who we can get to and we can train. It also has to be really easy for the folks who are receiving the information and collaborating and sending information back to you as well. And I'll give you one example. So one example of folks we work with is, believe it or not, dairy farmers. And there's a lot of information that goes back and forth. We don't think about it in our day-to-day, but pricing information and information about what those guys do every day that needs to be secured. And the question that we got from, the association that we were working with was, if I send this information to my dairy farmers, are they going to be able to open this and share information back with me? Like, is this going to be easy for them to use? And part of the reason they brought us in was because there was a phishing issue, right, where they received the secure information, clicked on a link, and all of a sudden some wiring information was sent from a dairy farmer out to someone who shouldn't have received that information. So with our platform, they then could get around that, right? And it's so easy to use. I think the dairy farmer, in subsequent conversations, they told us it was probably easier to use than some of the email clients that they've been using. And so we that's good feedback from folks who, to your point, they're probably the least technical folks we're going to be dealing with, right? They're folks who are out on a farm every day. They don't care about computers. Right. So that's the only thing I would add there.
Fishing is what they go do on the weekend to get away from milking cows.
Exactly. You need something different there. Yeah, exactly.
So I guess to that point, another question that I like to ask in these is let's talk a little bit about partnering with Accellion. I am a new customer. From my role that I have with Optiv, I see companies getting their software displaced almost to a T because of service issues. It's almost never a technical issue, which I find to be very interesting. If someone is replacing a security product that they have in their stack, it's almost always because support is bad. The only time they ever talk to the sales team is when they have another PO to push across the table. Like, there's a lot of bad business that happens there. Part of what we're trying to do here too is understand how companies are addressing, the needs of their customers to ensure that there's long-term success. Products are being used, all the functionality is being used, things are fully developed. So can you guys talk a little bit about what that post PO interaction looks like with Accellion?
Yeah, absolutely. So, anybody who's telling you differently, your clients, once they're closed, they're the lifeblood of your business, right? People who forget them away are just, they've lost their minds. You've done so much work to get there and build that partnership. So something I truly believe in, you have to be consultative, right? I hate pushing products down people's throat. I'm just trying to solve problems. When I look at the security space, there's 7,000 plus security vendors in North America alone, right? To your point. So it's like, everyone's trying to figure this thing out. And if we're not working together and trying to solve these problems and solve further problems with what you have, we're all missing the boat. Right. So it's about having, my team, and Katya does a great job being that liaison, helping them answer questions, right? I'm trying to solve problems with what they've already bought. Inevitably, if we do a good enough job, they're going to expand it, right? And so we're focused on what they bought, how they're going to do it. We want to make sure it's working and we're ready to go. So just as you'd imagine, right, 24/7, follow us on support, domestic, international, everything you need, fully trained, ready to go. But the reality is the people that are selling to you at our company are also the people that are going to be supporting you and ensuring that it is going to work moving forward and that you're satisfied.
So when we think about that, let's talk about the flip side from the user experience. The engineer, analyst, I'm in the SOC, whatever. How do you, in the tuning period post PO, I'm assuming there's some sort of tuning period. How do you help squelch some of that noise? Like, finance could send any string of numbers, and if you're just looking for 9 digits, let's say, you're going to trigger on every single person that sends 9 digits. So what does that tuning period look like?
Absolutely. So it's all about getting high responsive alerts, right? And so benefit for us is that we're piggybacking off of their infrastructure. So the tagging and anything they're going to need to be done, hopefully that's already been done ahead of time. Then we're tuning the system, to your point, to pick off on those tags. Now, inevitably the question always comes when the CEO is like, my email can't go out. Why is my email not going out? Let my email go out right now. I'm the CEO. And so that inevitably is addressed. And then we work out from there. Our deployments, there's 2 ways you could think about it. One, if you're actually going through a proof of value with us, we literally can turn it into production, the way that it's set up, because again, the client owns the keys and it's private. So we can expand that and make it into production. So that expedites exactly what you're talking about significantly. Now, the other side of it is, hey, we want a new one. Maybe we want to go into our FedRAMP environment or something of that sort. It'll take us a matter of hours to get it spun up. And then from there, it's actually the practical usage and saying, let's tune this down. I have seen government contractors probably are the most robust with this framework, they're going to take the longest. Then healthcare is probably second, but I've got some tech companies that don't have the best framework, right? So the fine tuning is about 45 seconds. You know, they're learning as it comes out. And so I've talked to a number of CISOs, right? They think about DLP and they say, look, I bought DLP. I like DLP. I get the idea of DLP, but getting DLP to actually work is very, very hard. So we'll still pass the data through the DLP, but what they get back is then the full list of everything going on, but we don't actually stop the progress. That allows them, to your point, to then take a fresh look at this and say, okay, how can I make this from a statistics perspective, right? How can I make this very high confidence, very high that I'm doing the right, I'm not hindering the business. But that inevitably, in my professional opinion, it takes about a quarter, right? Because you want to include a quarter end for all the things that go around a quarter end from reporting and regulation. So if you get a 90-day window, that you're ready to go. It shouldn't take any longer than that.
Excellent. Hey, hey, Matt, before you go ahead, just want to add on to that. So, you know, what happens post-PO with Accellion? I certainly spend a lot of time with, you know, prospective new customers up front, and I stay in touch with customers after the fact. But, you know, I do get busy. What I love about Accellion is we have a customer success team. So post-sale, the very next step with Accellion is that a dedicated customer success client executive will reach out to the customers, and from there, they handle anything from an implementation standpoint, and it's white glove. It's, for us, it's part of the process. So when you purchase Accellion software, you're looking, you know, to us to be a partner. So that client success manager is going to, from step one introductions to a project plan to implementation to tuning, that's all part of our my dedicated customer success rep. So every customer of mine is also that customer success rep's customer. Quarterly reviews, whatever it takes, whatever that touch point needs to be, that customer success team provides that extra value too. So it's one of the things I like about working here. It's different than anywhere else I've ever worked in that sense. Yeah,
you answered my question right before I asked it, so that was pretty good actually. Although out of my mind, it's not.
I'm getting to know you, Matt.
All right, well, we're kind of rolling up on the being just over our half an hour time frame here. So this has been an awesome conversation. Actually, this is exactly the types of conversations that I want these videos to be. I guess to that point, I'll just throw this out, Lloyd, unless you've got some other questions. Like if you guys have, you know, again, your closing arguments, to use some legal speak, I guess, but you know, again, let's just kind of come full circle and, you know, tell people again why they should spend a little bit more time with you than they already have today.
Yeah, I think, look, if you're looking at your business and you're wondering how can it goes back to this, right? We're all now remote, right? But if what's keeping you up at night is governance around just where your content is moving, right? That crown jewel of IP, whatever it is to you, I can give you a fresh look that probably no one else is looking at. Right? I can give you a combination of ideas out there from the industry and inherently something different, and that truly is privacy and governance. You know, if that's interested to you to help you work with regulators and run your business, you know, that's where we want to be, and I truly believe that this is what we can help organizations do.
And if you're not worried about protecting your data, we probably should have a completely different conversation.
You're a brand new tech company.
I want to look into dairy farming.
Yep.
All right, great. Well, to wrap things up, I really appreciate you guys doing this. Again, this is exactly how I want these conversations. I think this is really useful information that's delivered in exactly the right way. So Craig, Katya, Mike, I really appreciate you guys doing this. For everyone that's watching, we'll have some contact information and some other information in the description field. Please do all the fun YouTube-y stuff like liking and subscribing and sharing and all that. We are inching our way closer to that magic 100 subscriber mark where we get our own super cool URL with YouTube. And I appreciate everyone spending some time with us again today. And we will see you very soon for episode 8. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Lloyd.
Thanks,
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.